The bayou didn't do winter like the movies did. No clean snow, no soft silence, just cold rain that felt like needles and a wind that carried the smell of brackish water, mud, rot, and something metallic, like the world had been left out in the weather too long. Officer Ethan Cole drove with both hands on the wheel because it kept him honest. Not because he needed the control, because his body remembered what happened when you let your grip loosen at the wrong time. The patrol unit's wipers scraped back and forth in a rhythm that should have been calming. It wasn't. Each pass cleared a slice of road just long enough for the darkness to show itself again, slick and reflective, like the highway was trying to mirror every thought he didn't want to think. In the back, behind the partition, K9 Shadow sat upright. Not the loose, friendly sit civilians expected from a German Shepherd, not the good boy posture made for photos. Shadow sat assembled, front paws planted, spine straight, eyes tracking the world through the side window with the kind of attention that didn't waste motion. His ears adjusted in small increments, left, right, forward, collecting information like a quiet machine built for one purpose: find the truth. Dispatch had called it in as structure fire, possible arson, youth shelter. Possible. Ethan had learned that word was what people used when they didn't want to feel responsible for what they already knew. He turned off the main road onto a narrow strip of cracked asphalt that cut toward the wetlands. The unit's tires hissed over standing water. Far ahead, orange emergency lights stuttered through the trees. When he reached the scene, it didn't look like fire had happened. It looked like fire had won. The shelter was a low two-story building that had been a converted church once, back when people still built places to gather. Now it was a carcass, roof collapsed inward, windows blown out, the walls blackened so completely the structure seemed more shadow than wood. Steam rose from the ruins in ragged breaths. Rain fell, stubborn and cold, and still the air smelled burned. Ethan parked and stepped out, boots hitting wet gravel. The cold slapped his face, but he didn't flinch. His eyes moved the way they always did: perimeter, exits, angles, people. Captain Maria Hayes stood near the command vehicle, hood up, clipboard in hand, posture sharp despite the weather. Maria wasn't tall, but she carried authority like it was stitched into her bones. Pragmatic, empathetic, the kind of leader who didn't waste words but didn't forget the human cost either. She looked up when Ethan approached. "Cole," she said, "you and Shadow are up." Ethan nodded once. "Victims?" "None confirmed." Maria's jaw tightened slightly. "That's the problem. Shelter had 12 beds. Staff says there were at least 6 kids here last night. 2 staff members. They're both accounted for. Shaken. No injuries." "No kids?" Ethan asked, voice flat. Maria shook her head. "No bodies, no blood, no trace." Ethan's eyes slid past her to the burned doorway, now just a warped frame. "Footprints?" Maria's gaze sharpened. "You saw them." He had. Near the back exit, where the fire hadn't burned as hot, the mud held impressions, small, frantic steps. 2 sets close together, running. Then the trail veered toward the flooded drainage ditch behind the shelter. And then it stopped, like the water had erased them. Deputy Lucas Reed jogged over, face bright even in the gloom. Lucas was younger, energy always just a little too loud for the situations they walked into, but not incompetent. He was the kind of rookie who cracked a joke at the wrong time and then threw himself into danger at the right time. "Morning, sir," Lucas said, rain beating on his hair. "We got the staff statements. They heard a bang around 3:30, smelled smoke, pulled the alarm, then the back door was already open, like somebody wanted it open." Ethan didn't answer yet. His attention had drifted to the side wall of the building. There, half hidden behind a collapsed beam, was spray paint. A symbol, not a tag, not a random gang mark, something deliberate. An oval shape with a notch cut into one edge like a broken coin. Inside it, a thin line that curved like a river. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Not fear, recognition. He stepped closer, the rain turning ash into black streaks on his gloves. The symbol was warped by heat, but still visible enough to be unmistakable. He'd seen it once before, not on a wall, on paper. A stamp in the corner of an intake folder, yellowed with age, the kind of file that lived in basements and never got opened, unless someone needed to pretend the system cared. His file. He hadn't been meant to see it. He'd been 16, bored in an office while Maria, back then a detective, not a captain, had gone through paperwork for a case that had nothing to do with him. He'd wandered. He'd opened a cabinet that wasn't locked. He'd found the folder with his name, or the name the state gave him, Ethan Cole. Found after Hurricane Lucille, age unknown, no guardians located, transferred through temporary care. And in the corner, that same broken oval emblem. His hands had been steady then. His face had stayed neutral, but something inside him had moved like a door unlocking. Now, staring at it on a wall burned black, Ethan felt that same door open again. Maria's voice came from behind him, quieter now. "You okay?" Ethan didn't look back. "Yeah." It was a lie, but it was also a habit. He forced his mind into motion. Facts, procedure, the thing that kept you from drowning in meaning. He motioned towards Shadow. "Deploy." Shadow rose instantly, fluid and silent, stepping out of the unit like he'd been waiting for permission to become what he was. Ethan clipped the lead, crouched slightly, and let Shadow sniff the air near the footprints. "Find," Ethan said. One word. Calm. Certain. Shadow's nose dropped. His body shifted forward, a subtle change in tension that Ethan felt through the lead like a current. The dog moved toward the muddy prints, inhaled once, then began tracking, slow at first, head low, tail level. Lucas hovered close, trying not to crowd. Maria watched from the side, eyes on Ethan more than on the dog. The trail led them past the back fence, through a patch of cattails, and down toward the drainage ditch. The water there was dark and swollen from rain. It moved slowly, deceptively calm, carrying leaves and debris like small bodies. Shadow paused at the edge, nose working harder, reading scent through moisture and chemical noise. Then he angled left, following the ditch upstream toward the industrial district where the river met old warehouses that hadn't been used since before Lucas was born. Ethan felt his pulse stabilize. Action did that. Movement gave you something to do with the weight. Maria stepped in beside him. "Lena's on her way," she said. "Forensics says the burn pattern is weird. Fire ate through offices first. Paper-heavy rooms." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Someone wanted records gone." Maria nodded. "That's what it looks like." Lucas cut in, voice lower than usual. "Captain, staff said something else. They said the kids were quiet, like they'd been told to be quiet. They didn't run around, didn't fight, didn't act like kids." Ethan's eyes flicked to the water again, to the place the footprints stopped. "Like they were trained," he said. Lucas swallowed. "Yeah." Shadow tugged once. Not frantic, just certain. Ethan followed. The bayou wind shifted, and for a moment he swore he smelled something underneath the smoke and wet earth. Not just ash. Fear. Dr. Lena Moore arrived with her hood down, rain flattening her hair against her temples. She didn't seem to notice the cold. Lena lived half in the world and half inside patterns, chemistry, psychology, the quiet logic of evidence. She stepped into the shelter ruins carefully, flashlight in hand, eyes scanning the structure like it was a language. Ethan and Shadow waited near the command vehicle while she worked. Maria stood with them, silent. Lucas paced, unable to stand still, then finally came back holding a plastic evidence bag. "Found this near the back door," he said, handing it to Lena. It was tucked under a broken tile, like someone placed it there. Lena took the bag, studied the contents. Inside was a small scrap of laminated paper, burned on one edge but still readable. It looked like part of an ID badge or a label. Stamped on it, faint but clear, was the broken oval emblem. Lena's eyes lifted slowly, going from the emblem to Ethan. "You recognize that," she said. Not a question. Ethan didn't answer right away. He kept his face calm, but Shadow's ears flicked, sensing the shift in Ethan's breathing. Maria's gaze sharpened. "Ethan," he exhaled through his nose. "I've seen it before." "Where?" Maria asked, voice careful. Ethan hesitated. The instinct was to keep it locked away, but Maria wasn't just his captain. She'd been a witness to his career from the beginning. She'd seen him bleed. She'd seen him refuse help. She'd seen him show up anyway. He finally said it. "In my file." Lucas blinked. "Your file?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the shelter ruins. "The intake file, when I was a kid." Lena's expression shifted, curiosity turning to focus. "So this emblem is institutional." "Or criminal," Maria said, the word quiet but heavy. Ethan felt something cold settle behind his ribs. This wasn't just arson. This wasn't just missing kids. This was a thread that ran back into his own beginning. And if someone was burning records now, they weren't doing it because the past was dead. They were doing it because the past could still testify. Lena turned the evidence bag over once more. "The fire's behavior supports that," she said. "Accelerant distribution is concentrated near the offices and storage closets, not the sleeping quarters." Lucas frowned. So, whoever did this didn't care if the building burned as long as the paper burned first. Maria's voice was steel-wrapped in calm, which means this isn't about chaos, it's about control. Ethan looked down at Shadow, who stood alert at his side, eyes on the tree line like he could see what waited beyond it. Ethan had spent his life becoming the kind of man nobody could move. But right now, something had reached inside him and touched the part that was still a child in the storm, carried from one place to another, renamed, filed away. Maria stepped closer, lowering her voice so Lucas couldn't hear every word. "You don't have to lead this," she said. "Not alone." Ethan met her gaze. His eyes were steady. "I'm already in it," he said. Shadow leaned subtly into his leg, not begging, not performing, just grounding him in the present. Ethan straightened. "Where does Shadow's track go?" Lucas answered, glad to have a task. "Old River District, warehouses. Some are boarded, some are not." Maria nodded once. "Then that's our next move." Ethan clipped Shadow's lead tighter, as if securing something inside himself too. He looked once more at the burned symbol on the wall and felt a promise form in him, quiet, absolute. If someone was burning names, he was going to make sure the truth stayed alive long enough to speak. They moved into the river district just after sunrise, when the sky was a dull slate and the water looked like oil. The warehouses sat along the levee like dead animals, long, low silhouettes with broken windows and corrugated metal peeled back by storms. Some buildings still bore faded company names. Others were blank, as if even their owners had abandoned the idea of being remembered. Shadow's track tightened as soon as they stepped onto the wet concrete. Ethan could feel it in the lead, a mild tug, a steady pull, an invisible line connecting past to present. Lucas stayed close, trying to match Ethan's pace without looking like he was being assigned babysitter duty. Maria maintained radio control, splitting the small unit in a way that kept them safe without wasting time. Ethan and Shadow forward, Lucas as cover and entry support, Maria coordinating perimeter and calling in additional patrol units, Lena documenting and preparing evidence protocols. Lena stopped near a puddle that shimmered with a rainbow sheen. She crouched, gloved finger touching the edge, then sniffed lightly. "Fuel residue," she said. "Recent, not from decades ago. Someone's active here." Lucas muttered, "Great. Haunted warehouses and fresh arson juice." Maria shot him a look. "Save your stand-up routine." Lucas lifted both hands. "Yes, ma'am." Ethan didn't smile, but something in his chest eased 0.5 millimeter at the normalcy of it. Lucas's humor wasn't just noise, it was his way of proving fear didn't get to own the room. Shadow halted at the mouth of an alley between two warehouses. His ears went forward. His body stiffened, not panic, not aggression, just alertness sharpening into readiness. Ethan followed his gaze. A chain-link gate stood half open, rattling softly in the wind. Beyond it, a narrow corridor led deeper into the district, where the river fog pooled thick. Ethan's voice was low. "Maria." "I see it," Maria replied. Lucas shifted his grip on his flashlight, swallowing. "You want me to—" "Cover," Ethan said. "Simple." Lucas nodded, stepping to the side, ready. Ethan and Shadow slipped through the gate. The corridor smelled like wet rust and old wood. Somewhere inside, water dripped in a slow, patient rhythm. Shadow's nose moved fast now, reading a story written in molecules. He turned right, then left, then stopped at a steel service door. The door was padlocked, but the lock wasn't old. It was clean metal, new enough to shine in the gray morning. Ethan crouched, ran a hand along the latch. "Occupied," he murmured. Lucas leaned in. "We got probable cause?" Maria's voice crackled through the radio. "If you have reason to believe there are missing juveniles inside, you have exigent circumstances. Document everything." Lena added softly, "And don't contaminate the threshold if possible." But her eyes lifted to Ethan, understanding the priority. People over paper. Ethan's hand tightened on the lead. Shadow stood perfectly still, eyes locked on the gap beneath the door, as if he could already see the darkness inside. Ethan looked at Lucas. "Cut it!" Lucas pulled bolt cutters from his kit like he'd been waiting for the moment. He wedged them around the lock and squeezed. Metal snapped. The sound echoed down the corridor like a gunshot. For a beat, everything held its breath. Then Shadow let out a single low huff, not a bark, just a warning that something had shifted. Ethan pushed the door open. The smell hit first. Not just mildew or rust. Chemical. A sharp, sweet edge that made the back of Ethan's throat tighten. Accelerant. Inside was a long storage hall lined with shelving. Most of the shelves were empty, but along the far wall were filing cabinets, metal, heavy, arranged like someone cared about what they held. Lena's flashlight beam swept over them. "Records?" she breathed. Maria's voice in Ethan's ear was immediate. "Do not touch anything yet. Photograph, gloves, chain of custody." Ethan moved forward anyway, slow, controlled, scanning for threats. Lucas covered him, flashlight cutting through shadows. Shadow moved ahead, nose down, then suddenly stopped. His head snapped toward a corner behind a stack of pallets. Ethan's body reacted before his thoughts finished forming. He raised his weapon, voice sharp. "Police! Show your hands!" Silence. Then a small sound, not footsteps, breathing, too light, too scared. Ethan's heart kicked once. "Shadow," he said, calmer now. "Find." Shadow advanced, slow, then stopped again, and sat, trained indication. Ethan approached, weapon lowered slightly. Behind the pallets, in a space barely wide enough to fit a person, were two shapes, not adults, kids, teenage maybe. Crouched together, faces smudged with grime, eyes wide and blank in a way Ethan hated because he recognized it. They didn't scream. They didn't run. They didn't speak. They just stared at Shadow like he was a judge. Lucas whispered, "Jesus." Maria's radio voice turned hard. "Ethan, status." Ethan kept his voice steady. "We have live juveniles, 2 confirmed." Lena's breath caught. "Are they injured?" Ethan scanned them quickly. No visible blood, but their hands were trembling. He holstered his weapon, crouched, and lowered his voice the way you did with feral animals and wounded humans. "You're safe," he said. "You hear me? You're safe now." One of the kids flinched at the word safe like it had been used as a lie before. Shadow sat still, ears relaxed, gaze softening in that subtle way only Ethan noticed, Shadow shifting from tactical mode to anchoring mode. Ethan extended a gloved hand, palm down, non-threatening. The kid's eyes flicked to it, then to Shadow, then back. No movement. Maria's voice was controlled urgency. "Get them out, now." Ethan nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Lucas, take lead, slow, no sudden grabs." Now Lucas stepped forward, his usual brightness gone. He crouched too, voice gentler than Ethan expected. "Hey," Lucas said. "I'm Lucas. This big guy's Shadow. He's honestly the best coworker I've ever had. You want to come outside? It's less creepy than whatever this is." A tiny, almost invisible shift. One kid blinked slowly, like the joke was a language they half remembered. Ethan watched the filing cabinets along the wall, records, names, the emblems stamped on paper, and the smell of accelerant in the air. Someone had planned this place as a vault, and now, with police here, someone would try to burn it. Ethan's jaw tightened, because he knew what it felt like to be a file someone wanted erased, and he wasn't going to let it happen again. Rain found its way into everything out here. It crept through seams, through cracked mortar, through the smallest failures in construction, like the world was proving a point. Inside the warehouse hall, it was warmer than outside, but only because the air was stale and trapped. The smell of fuel sat on top of the damp like a warning label. Lucas got the first teen to stand by doing something Ethan couldn't have done without it turning into an order. He talked like a person, not an officer, not a rescuer. Just a guy who didn't expect anything from them except the next small step. "Okay," Lucas said, keeping his hands visible, moving slowly. "We're going to walk. No rushing. I'm right here. Shadow's right there. He's not going to jump on you. He's old-school professional." The teen's eyes stayed on Shadow. Shadow didn't move, didn't lean forward, didn't sniff aggressively. He sat like a statue that had decided to be kind. Ethan watched the second teen, the smaller one, hair longer, maybe a girl, maybe not. Their face was turned slightly away, chin tucked like they were trying to become invisible by shrinking. Ethan knew that posture. He'd worn it when he was young enough that people could still call him kid without irony. "Hey," Ethan said low, "look at me." The teen's eyes flicked up for half a second, then away. Ethan didn't push. He didn't chase eye contact. He just stayed present. "You don't have to talk," he said. "We're leaving, that's all." Shadow shifted his weight once, a small adjustment, like he was calibrating the room. Then he lowered his head slightly and exhaled. The second teen's shoulders dropped a fraction. Lucas guided the first teen toward the door. Ethan stayed back, angled between the teens and the filing cabinets, eyes scanning for any other movement in the shadows. Because if there were kids here, there could be someone watching them. Someone who used this place. Someone who didn't want witnesses alive. Maria's voice came through Ethan's earpiece. "I've got 2 patrol units inbound and EMS staging on River Road. Keep your exit clean. Any sign of suspect?" "Negative," Ethan replied, "but accelerant is present. Strong." Lena's voice followed, brisk and controlled. "Ethan, do not touch the cabinets. I need photos of the lock mechanisms, any markings, any residue patterns. If the suspect returns, this becomes a fire scene. We can't lose the ledger." Ethan swallowed the instinctive anger that rose at "can't lose the ledger," because what he heard underneath it was, "we can't lose the truth." And for most of his life, Ethan had learned truth was what other people got. He'd gotten survival. He watched Lucas bring the first teen out into the corridor. Footsteps soft, no protest. The second teen still crouched behind the pallets, breathing shallow. Ethan lowered himself onto one knee, keeping his posture neutral, non-threatening. Shadow stayed beside him, seated, calm. "You hungry?" Ethan asked, not because he expected an answer, because it was an easy question, one that didn't force memory. The teen's eyes flicked up again, then down. Ethan nodded, as if they'd spoken. "Yeah, figured." He reached slowly into his jacket pocket and pulled out a protein bar, still wrapped. He didn't hand it over. He set it on the ground between them, then slid it forward with 2 fingers, like he was offering peace in a place that didn't know peace. Shadow's ears relaxed further. The teen stared at the bar, like it might explode. Then, cautiously, their hand darted out, grabbed it, and retreated back to their chest. Ethan didn't react. He didn't smile. He didn't comment. He just said, "Good, now we're going out." The teen didn't stand. But their breathing changed, a little less frantic, a little more present. Ethan shifted his weight back, giving them space, and used his other hand to signal Shadow. "Stand," Ethan whispered. Shadow rose smoothly. The dog's body blocked the corridor view for a moment. Not in a threatening way, but in a protective one, a moving wall, a promise. The teen looked at Shadow, then at Ethan. Ethan held still. "You can follow Shadow. He knows where safe is." It was a gamble. But Ethan had learned something about fear. It trusted animals before it trusted people. The teen's knees straightened slowly. Their legs shook. Then they took one step. Shadow didn't move until the step happened. Then he walked forward at a measured pace, slow enough to not overwhelm, steady enough to lead. The teen followed. Ethan rose, last to move, eyes sweeping the hall one more time. The filing cabinet stood along the far wall like a courtroom full of silent witnesses. The smell of fuel was stronger near them. Ethan's stomach tightened. Someone had been here recently. Someone had poured that fuel with purpose, and if they'd poured it, they'd planned to ignite it. Ethan stepped into the corridor with the teens, pulling the steel door shut behind him. Lucas was waiting at the gate, relief in his eyes. "2," he whispered. Ethan nodded once. "2." Maria met them outside, rain streaking her face. Her eyes went straight to the teens, assessing injuries, shock, the emptiness that wasn't emptiness, but learned quiet. She softened her voice instantly. "EMS is here. You're safe. We're going to take care of you." The teens didn't respond. They just hovered close to Shadow like he was the only thing in the world that didn't ask questions. Lena stepped up, gaze sharp, already thinking. "Ethan, I need—" A sound cut through her. A sharp metallic clank from somewhere deeper in the warehouse district. Ethan's head snapped toward it. Shadow's ears went forward, body tensing. Lucas's hand dropped instinctively toward his sidearm. Maria's voice became command. "Everyone freeze." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a second sound, fainter but distinct, glass breaking. Ethan felt the world narrow. "Maria," he said, voice low, "we're not alone." Maria's eyes hardened. "Lucas, take the kids to EMS, now. Stay with them." Lucas hesitated. His gaze flicked to Ethan, then to Shadow, then to the teens. He swallowed, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am." He guided the teens away gently, keeping his body between them and the shadows. Maria looked at Ethan and Lena. "You two stay on me. We hold perimeter until backup arrives." Ethan didn't argue. He shouldn't. But his attention was already back on that steel door. The cabinets, the smell of fuel, because the sound he'd heard wasn't random. It was movement. And if someone was moving, they were either running or preparing. Ethan adjusted his grip on Shadow's lead. "Shadow, heel!" Shadow slid close, shoulder aligning with Ethan's leg, silent agreement. Lena's voice was tight. "If they light it, everything inside goes." Maria's jaw clenched. "Then we stop them before they do." They moved deeper into the district, step by step. Rain slicked the ground. Fog thickened along the river. The warehouses watched like blind giants. Then Ethan saw it. A thin trail of liquid leading across the concrete, dark, glossy. Fuel. And it didn't just lead to the door they'd opened. It led farther down, toward another warehouse, larger, more intact, its windows boarded but not broken. A building that looked like it had been waiting. Maria's voice was barely above a whisper. "That's our target." Lena swallowed. "If there are more records, or more kids." Ethan's eyes fixed on the building. And then, almost imperceptible, he saw a flicker near the side entrance. A movement, a shadow in shadow, someone slipping behind a stack of crates. Ethan's pulse stayed steady. His voice didn't rise. "Contact," he said. Maria lifted her radio. "All units, expedite. We have possible suspect movement at Warehouse 12. Ethan didn't wait for permission. He stepped forward, Shadow moving with him, body low, controlled. Because he knew something the world forgot too often. When someone is burning history, they don't stop because you ask nicely. They stop because you got there in time. Warehouse 12 had the posture of a place that lied. From the outside it looked abandoned, like every other building along the river. Boarded windows, rusted gutters, a roofline that sagged in just the right places to convince you no one cared. But the padlock on the side door was new, and the ground beside it was clean of leaves, as if feet had been brushing it clear. Maria held up a hand, stopping them short. She crouched behind a concrete barrier, scanning the entrance. Ethan crouched beside her, Shadow pressed close, breathing quiet. Lena stayed back half a step, gloved hands tight around her evidence camera. Maria's voice was calm and lethal. "We do this right." Ethan nodded. "No hero moves." Maria's eyes flicked to him. "You mean it?" Ethan didn't blink. "Yes." It wasn't a promise to her. It was a promise to himself. He didn't need to be a hero. He needed to be effective. Shadow's nose worked the air. His body stiffened. Ethan felt it. "He's got scent." Maria leaned closer. "Inside?" Ethan watched Shadow. Shadow's ears were forward, tail level, not wagging, not relaxed, alert. "Yes," Ethan said. "Fresh." Lena whispered, "If this is where they moved the cash..." Maria exhaled slowly. "Then it's where they'll burn it." Ethan's mind ran the pattern. Shelter burned, smaller cache, now warehouse, escalation. Someone cleaning up old sins. They needed proof, not just suspicion. Maria's eyes narrowed. "Entry." Ethan moved first, Shadow at heel. Lucas's bolt cutters now in Ethan's hand because Lucas had taken the teens to EMS, and Maria hadn't wanted to call him back into this until necessary. Ethan wedged the cutters around the lock. He hesitated for half a second. Not because of fear, because of what was behind that door. Truth. Or another lie. He squeezed. Metal snapped. The sound echoed. Ethan pushed the door open a crack. The smell hit immediately. Not just fuel this time. Paper. Old paper. Dry. Dusty. Stored too long. A library smell. A record smell. Ethan's stomach tightened. Maria moved in behind him, flashlight up, weapon drawn. "Police," she said, voice firm. "Show yourself." No response. They slipped inside. The interior was larger than expected. Not an open hall like the first warehouse. This was partitioned. Rooms built inside rooms. Makeshift offices. Storage closets. A place designed to sort, hold, move. Shadow's body shifted as soon as his paws hit the floor. He moved ahead half a step, nose low. Ethan followed his line. Lena's flashlight swept over a wall, and Ethan's eyes caught it. The emblem. The broken oval with the river line. stamped on multiple cardboard boxes stacked neatly near a desk. Not spray paint, not graffiti. A stamp, official-looking, consistent. Maria's voice was tight. "This is an organization." Lena stepped closer, camera clicking. "Or a front, but the mark is consistent. That suggests structure." Ethan's throat felt dry. Structure means records. Shadow stopped at a closed interior door and sat. Indication. Ethan reached for the knob. Maria held up a hand. "Wait." Ethan froze. Maria listened. At first, nothing. Then, a faint sound. Not footsteps, not movement, a hiss, like gas escaping. Lena's eyes widened. "Accelerant dispersal?" Maria's jaw clenched. "They're prepping ignition." Ethan's voice went low. "We're out of time." Maria made a decision in a single breath. "Open it." Ethan turned the knob and pushed. The room beyond was small and packed with filing cabinets, and on the floor, running along the baseboards, was a line of fuel soaked into rags and paper, improvised fuses. In the center of the room was a metal desk. On the desk, a stack of binders, labels facing outward, numbers, dates, initials, chain of custody, transfer logs, the kind of evidence that didn't just suggest a crime. It proved a system. Lena's breath caught like she'd been punched. "This is it." Shadow's head snapped toward the far corner. A shape moved, fast. Ethan reacted, stepping forward, weapon lifting. But the shape wasn't an adult. It was a kid, small, younger than the teens outside, curled behind a cabinet, eyes huge, mouth pressed shut so hard his lips had gone white. Ethan's stomach dropped. Maria cursed under her breath. "There are more." Lena whispered urgently. "If the fuses are set—" A click sounded from somewhere deeper in the building. A lighter? A trigger? Ethan didn't wait. He grabbed the binders off the desk with one hand because Lena needed them, and with the other he motioned to Shadow. "Find," Ethan said, voice sharp. Shadow surged forward, nose straight to the child, then stopped and lowered his head gently. The child didn't scream. He just stared at the dog, like Shadow was the first thing in the world that didn't feel like a threat. Maria's voice snapped into command. "Ethan, get the kid out!" "Lena, take the binders. Photograph what you can as you move. We are not staying in a building soaked in fuel." Lena's hands shook slightly as she clutched the binders. She forced control. "Got it!" Ethan crouched by the child, voice low. "Hey, we're leaving. Now." The child didn't move. Shadow nudged him, soft, patient. The child's fingers curled into Shadow's fur like it was a rope in storm water. Ethan's chest tightened because he knew that grip. It wasn't affection. It was survival. Ethan lifted the child carefully, supporting his weight like he'd done for injured teammates and frightened civilians. Maria led them back into the corridor, moving fast, radio already in hand. "Dispatch, we have additional juveniles inside. Possible incendiary device setup. Fire department now." The building around them felt suddenly alive with threat. Every breath carried fuel. Every step could spark something unseen. They reached the main hall just as a low whoosh sounded behind them. A flare of orange light bloomed in the doorway they'd left. The improvised fuses had caught. Fire raced along the baseboards like it had been waiting for permission. Lena's face went pale. "It's igniting." Maria didn't stop. "Move!" They ran, not frantic, controlled, survival sprint. Shadow stayed tight at Ethan's side, ears pinned back against heat and smoke, but body still precise. They burst out the side door into rain and gray air. Behind them, inside Warehouse 12, flames licked up the walls. Black smoke poured out in thick waves. Ethan didn't look back. He kept moving until the child was clear, until the distance felt like safety rather than luck. Outside, the sound of sirens grew louder. Fire engines arrived, lights slicing through fog. Lucas ran toward them from the EMS area, eyes wide. "Captain, what?" Maria snapped. "More kids, one recovered. Warehouse is burning. Get medics here." Lucas nodded, face drained, but moving. Lena clutched the binders against her chest like a lifeline. Ethan set the child gently on a stretcher as medics swarmed. The child's fingers tried to keep hold of Shadow. Shadow stayed still, letting the grip happen. Ethan watched the fire grow behind them, smoke rising into the wet sky like a confession. Maria stepped beside him, voice low. That was close. Ethan's jaw worked. They were ready. Lena's eyes were sharp despite her shaking. "These binders, this ledger, it's not just recent. It references older dates, years." Maria looked at Ethan. "And the emblem." Ethan stared at the burning warehouse. His voice came out flat. "It's the same mark that followed me into the system." Maria's face tightened. Lena swallowed. "If this is a pipeline, then someone has been erasing and moving kids for a long time." Ethan felt something cold settle inside him. A different kind of truth. Not abandonment, not accident. The kind of truth that made you realize your life had been shaped by someone else's hands. And now those hands were trying to burn the evidence. Ethan looked down at Shadow, rain dripping from the dog's muzzle, eyes steady. Shadow met his gaze like he was saying, "We're still here. We can still act." Maria's voice was quiet. "We've got enough to open a major case, federal involvement." Lena nodded, gripping the binders tighter. "Accelerant signature is consistent. I can tie this to the shelter fire, and if we pull archive samples, maybe to older arsons." Lucas returned breathless. "Captain, fire department says they can slow it but not save the inside. Too much fuel." Maria's expression hardened. Then we already got what mattered most. Ethan's gaze shifted to the kids on stretchers, wrapped in blankets, silent as ghosts. And then back to the smoke. Because he knew the truth in his bones, this wasn't over. This was the moment the past realized it had been seen. And it would fight back. The fire at Warehouse 12 became a wall, not just of flame, but of decisions. Firefighters moved with practiced speed, hoses arcing water into the open doorway. Steam billowed out, mixing with smoke until the air looked like a storm trapped at ground level. Red lights pulsed through fog, radios crackled, orders layered over each other like static. Ethan stood under the awning of an adjacent building, rain dripping from his cuffs, watching the smoke push upward in thick black sheets. He wasn't watching the firefighters, he was watching the way smoke moved, because he knew what it meant when smoke suddenly changed direction. It meant the fire had found new air. It meant something inside had collapsed, or opened, or been forced. Maria stepped up beside him, helmeted now, face set. "We got a problem." Ethan didn't look away. "We always do." Maria kept her voice tight and factual, like that could contain it. "Fire chief says the amount of accelerant suggests secondary staging. This wasn't just about the cabinets inside. They poured enough to take the whole block." Lena approached with her evidence bag sealed, binders secured in plastic. Her gloves were smudged with soot. Her eyes, usually calm, had a bright, sharp edge now. "This wasn't improvised," she said. "The ignition method was deliberate. They used a timed fuse, not a lighter. Someone lit it and left." Lucas returned from EMS, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. "The teens won't talk," he said quietly. "They barely know their names, but one of them kept pointing. Like this." He lifted his hand, tracing a line in the air. "Downriver." Ethan's gaze flicked toward the dark line of warehouses stretching along the levee. Shadow stood at Ethan's side, water beating on his coat. The dog's breathing was steady, but his eyes tracked the wind. Maria's voice hardened. "If there's another site, and the suspect knows we're here, they'll burn that too." Lena's jaw clenched. "And if there are more kids?" Ethan's body moved before he thought it through. He turned, scanning downriver. He saw it then, faint at first, almost nothing. A shimmer in the air above Warehouse 14. Not fog, not rain. Smoke, thin, pale, rising in a thread. Ethan's voice went low. "There." Maria followed his line, then swore once. "That's not from 12?" Lucas's face drained. "Secondary blaze." Maria grabbed her radio. "All units, we have active smoke at Warehouse 14. Fire is spreading. Ethan." Ethan was already moving. Shadow moved with him, shoulder-aligned, lead taut but controlled, because this wasn't a building now. It was a clock. They ran along the levee road, boots splashing through puddles, breath harsh in cold air. Sirens wailed behind them. The river rolled black beside them, like it didn't care. Warehouse 14 was larger than 12, older, more intact, but with windows boarded so tightly it looked sealed. Smoke slipped out through the gaps in the boards. Not thick yet, but growing. Maria reached the side entrance first, flashlight beam cutting through rain. "Heat's inside." Lena pressed a hand against the metal, flinched. "It's already climbing." Lucas moved to cut the padlock, but stopped mid-motion. The lock wasn't there. The door was unlocked. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Unlocked meant invitation. Unlocked meant someone wanted the fire to breathe. Maria yanked the handle. The door swung inward with a wet creak. Heat rolled out like a living thing. Smoke followed, harsh and chemical, instantly clawing at Ethan's throat. Maria's voice snapped. Masks! They pulled on their respirators fast, practiced. Ethan dropped his gaze to Shadow. Shadow didn't need a mask. He needed direction. Ethan crouched, hand firm on Shadow's collar, eyes locked with the dog. Shadow, he said. One word, steady. Search. Shadow moved in. Not charging, not panicking. Working. Inside, Warehouse 14 was a maze. Stacked crates, old machinery, narrow aisles that forced single file. Smoke hung low, turning flashlight beams into pale cones. Ethan's mind mapped exits automatically. Left wall, right aisle, open floor center, back corner likely sealed. Fire crackled somewhere deeper, not roaring yet, but gaining. Lucas coughed once into his mask. This is insane. Maria shot him a look. Stay on Ethan. Don't lose him. Lena stayed close, camera strapped, gloved hand marking what she could in motion. Smoke density suggests ignition in multiple points, she said through the mask. They set it to spread. Ethan didn't respond. He tracked Shadow. Shadow's nose worked fast now. He turned left at a fork, then right, then froze. His entire body locked, ears forward, tail stiff. Ethan stopped instantly. In the distance, muffled behind walls and smoke, came a sound, a faint thump. Then another. Not wood settling, not flame. Human impact. Someone banging. Ethan's voice sharpened. You hear that? Lucas's eyes widened. Yeah. Maria's tone became command. Move. They pushed toward the sound, weaving through aisles that narrowed, stepping over scattered debris. Heat increased with each step. Sweat broke under Ethan's collar, despite the cold outside. Shadow led them to a metal door, heavy, industrial, with a deadbolt. Smoke curled from the edges. The banging came again, closer now. Someone was inside. Ethan tested the knob, locked. Lucas stepped forward. I got it. He pulled a Halligan tool from his kit, firefighter issued, carried for exactly this. He wedged it into the door seam and braced. Ethan planted his feet, shoulder to the door. Shadow pressed behind him. Maria covered the corridor, weapon raised, eyes scanning for movement, because if the suspect was here, smoke would be cover. Lena's voice was tight. If the fire reaches this area, oxygen drop will kill them before flame does. Lucas grunted, levering hard. Metal screamed. The bolt shifted, but held. Inside, the banging became frantic, then stopped. Ethan felt ice in his stomach. Now! Lucas repositioned, threw his weight. The door gave with a violent pop. Smoke billowed out like a wave. Ethan stepped in first, flashlight sweeping. The room was a sealed storage chamber, and inside were 3 teens, 2 standing pressed against a wall, 1 crouched on the floor, hands over their head. They didn't scream. They didn't rush the door. They looked at Ethan like he was either salvation or another handler. Shadow moved past Ethan into the room, nose sweeping, checking corners, then stopped near the crouched teen and sat. The teen's shoulders shook. Maria's voice cut through the fog. Out, now, single file, hands visible. Lucas moved in, voice soft. Hey, you're okay. We're getting you out. Lena's flashlight found something else on the far shelf. A stack of binders, more ledgers, boxes labeled with the emblem. The fire wasn't just destroying a building, it was destroying a system's memory. Lena's voice sharpened into urgency. Maria, there's more evidence here. Maria's jaw clenched. We don't have time. Lena's eyes flashed. If we lose this, we lose the chain. We lose the pattern. Ethan's mind made the call before anyone else could. He looked at Lena. Grab what you can carry. Only what you can carry. Lena didn't hesitate. She shoved her camera into her pocket and pulled out evidence bags, hands moving fast. Maria stared at Ethan. Cole, Ethan kept his voice level. We came for lives. We take evidence only if it doesn't cost lives. Maria held his gaze for half a second, then nodded once. 30 seconds. Lucas ushered the teens out, guiding them with his body, keeping them from bolting into smoke the wrong way. Shadow stayed with Ethan, eyes sharp, body angled toward the room like he was willing to block fire itself. Lena yanked 2 binders and a thin ledger loose, stuffed them into bags, then paused at a box labeled with the emblem. Her breath hitched. This is older. Ethan heard the change in her voice. Not curiosity. Impact. She grabbed the box, but it was too heavy. Ethan leaned in. Leave it. Lena hesitated, then pulled only the folder on top, thin, worn, like it had been handled too often. She shoved it into a bag. Maria's voice snapped. Time! The crackle of fire grew louder. Heat surged. Ethan backed out of the room, Shadow moving with him. As they entered the aisle, a beam overhead groaned, wood expanding, metal warping. Ethan's mind ran the math. Collapse risk. Maria moved them fast, keeping formation. Stay low. Follow my light. They pushed through the maze toward the exit. Then the building shifted. A deep, grinding moan ran through the structure like a dying animal. The floor trembled. Lucas shouted, "Go!" They sprinted. Smoke thickened, choking, turning the world into gray blindness. Ethan's flashlight beam looked like it was fighting to exist. Shadow's body surged ahead, then stopped abruptly, ears snapping forward. Ethan felt the lead tighten. Shadow was indicating a new line, a scent, not the teens, not Maria, something else. Ethan's heart kicked once, because Shadow didn't stop for ghosts. He stopped for truth. Ethan turned his head slightly, trying to see through smoke, a faint shape in the corridor ahead. A person. Moving fast, hugging walls, not a firefighter, no reflective stripes. No helmet, Maria saw it too. Her weapon rose. "Stop! Police!" The figure didn't stop. They bolted toward a side passage. Lucas moved instinctively to chase, but Maria snapped, "No! Stay with civilians!" Lucas froze, torn between instinct and order. He stuck with the teens, forcing them forward. Ethan's mind narrowed. Suspect fleeing in smoke, dangerous but not his priority. Then he saw what the suspect was carrying. A small canister, a fuel can. They weren't fleeing, they were relocating ignition. Ethan's voice went cold. "They're going to light another point." Maria's eyes hardened. "Cole, don't—" Ethan was already moving, not recklessly, precisely. He released tension on Shadow's lead. "Shadow, go!" Shadow launched, a streak of black and sable cutting through smoke, silent except for the thud of paws. The suspect turned too late. Shadow hit them low, not a mauling, a controlled takedown. The canister clattered, spilling fuel across concrete. The suspect went down hard, coughing, scrambling. Maria moved in, weapon trained. "Hands, now!" The suspect's hands shot up, shaking. Ethan reached them seconds later, breathing hard, eyes scanning the canister, the spill, the lighter clipped to the suspect's belt. "Maria," Ethan said, "they were going to torch the exit corridor." Maria's face tightened. "Cuff them." Lucas wasn't there. So Ethan moved. He pulled cuffs, snapped them on with practiced efficiency, keeping his body between suspect and Shadow. Shadow stood over the suspect, teeth bared but not biting, the picture of restrained force. Ethan's voice was low in the suspect's ear. "Who are you?" The suspect didn't answer, only coughed, eyes darting like a rat in a trap. Maria grabbed Ethan's arm. "We're leaving, now." The warehouse shuddered again. A beam crashed down behind them, sending sparks and dust into the smoke. Ethan's mind snapped back to priority. Kids out. He hauled the suspect up. Shadow stayed tight at heel. They ran, half dragging the suspect, navigating by Maria's light. At the exit, cold rain hit Ethan's face like a slap. He sucked in air greedily. Behind them, Warehouse 14 belched smoke into the sky, flames now visible through broken boards. Fire engines arrived, crews swarming. Paramedics rushed the teens into ambulances. Lucas stumbled out last, coughing, eyes red, then saw Ethan with the suspect and blinked like he couldn't process victory and horror at once. Maria barked orders. "Secure suspect, separate. No talking, we preserve chain." Lena emerged behind them, clutching evidence bags like a lifeline, face streaked with soot. She looked at Ethan, her eyes were bright, shaken. "I got the folder," she said. "And the accelerant profile, same as 12. Same mix, same signature." Maria exhaled hard, relief flickering for a second. "Good, that ties it." Lena's hands trembled as she reached into one bag and pulled out the thin folder, careful. The emblem stamped in the corner. She opened it slightly, just enough to glimpse a printed page inside. Her breath caught. Ethan saw the moment it landed for her. "What?" he demanded, voice low. Lena looked up slowly, eyes locking with his. "This," she said, voice barely steady, "references, an intake code, the kind used for emergency transfers." Ethan's stomach dropped. Lena swallowed. "And the date?" She didn't say it yet. She didn't have to. Ethan already knew what date mattered most in his life. He stepped closer, rain dripping off his jaw. "Say it!" Lena's voice broke just a fraction. "It's the same week you were found." The world didn't stop. Sirens still screamed. Rain still fell. Fire still burned. But inside Ethan, Something shifted, like a door finally opening to a room he'd spent his whole life pretending wasn't there. Maria watched him carefully, reading the tremor he refused to show. Lucas stood behind them, silent for once, eyes wide. Shadow pressed subtly into Ethan's leg, grounding him. Ethan stared at the folder. Not like an officer staring at evidence, like a child staring at proof he wasn't imagining his own story. Maria's voice was quiet and firm. "We go back. We process this right. Federal will want it, but this—" She nodded at Ethan. "This also matters to you." Ethan's jaw tightened. "It matters to the kids." Maria didn't argue. "Yes, and it matters to you." Ethan looked at the suspect, now being guided toward a patrol unit. The suspect's face was hidden by rain and hood, but their posture said one thing clearly. They believed they could outlast the truth. Ethan felt something cold settle into place, not rage, resolve, because he'd learned in life and in policing the same principle always applied. People can survive without answers, but systems survive on silence. And today, silence had been dragged into the rain and put in handcuffs. The station smelled like wet uniforms and burnt coffee. It was late by the time the chaos settled into paperwork, but Ethan had learned long ago that the aftermath was where cases lived or died. The kids, 5 total recovered across 2 sites, were in protective custody. Medical evaluations underway. Trauma counselors called. No interviews yet beyond basic identifiers. They still barely spoke. But they had eaten. They had taken blankets. And when Shadow had sat in the corner of the intake room, they had drifted toward him like gravity. Maria kept everything procedural, separate rooms, separate statements, chain of custody sealed, Lena's evidence logged with precision. Federal agents had already called. The word pipeline had been spoken aloud. The emblem had been photographed. Copies sent. But for the first time in Ethan's life, the emblem wasn't just a stamp on his past, it was a live crime. And live crimes could be prosecuted. Lena sat across from Ethan in the evidence room, folder open between them. She pointed with a gloved finger. This intake code is a transfer designation. It's used when a child is moved through emergency placement without standard paperwork. It's the kind of thing that creates gaps. Ethan's voice stayed flat. Gaps are where people disappear. Lena met his eyes. Exactly. Maria stood at the door, arms crossed. Suspects lawyered up. No name, no address. But we have enough to hold for arson, kidnapping, and endangerment pending confirmation. Federal will take lead once they connect broader pattern. Lucas leaned against the wall, looking exhausted. Rain dried into salt on his jacket. So what now? Ethan stared at the emblem stamped on the folder. What now was dangerous, because what now meant turning the lens on his own origin story. And Ethan had spent his whole career making sure his personal history didn't become a weakness. But he couldn't unsee it. And more importantly, those kids in the intake room couldn't afford him pretending it wasn't relevant. Because their silence wasn't just trauma, it was training. Ethan's voice came out quiet. Now we build something that outlives them. Maria's brow tightened. Explain. Ethan looked at her, calm, disciplined, sharp instincts. But inside, something vulnerable pressed against the cage of his control. This pipeline used shelters and transfer points because kids fall through systems, he said. They used fire because paper burns and memory disappears. They relied on people being too tired to connect the dots. Lena nodded slowly, understanding. So we connect them, Ethan continued, not just in court, in life. Lucas frowned. Like a task force? Maria's eyes narrowed. Or a program? Ethan's gaze flicked through the window to the hallway where Shadow sat with 2 of the teens. One teen had their hand resting on Shadow's back, fingers sunk into fur like they were holding on to the only thing that didn't ask for a story they couldn't tell. Ethan's voice was low. K-9 work gives structure, predictable routines, clear boundaries. It's what kept me functional when I had no answers. Maria watched him, eyes softening slightly. You want to build a resilience unit. Ethan nodded. A joint program, K-9 supported youth stabilization. Partner it with missing persons, trauma-informed but disciplined. Not therapy speeches, structure, safety, skills. Lucas blinked. That's actually smart. Lena's expression was introspective but warm, and Shadow becomes the anchor. Ethan didn't smile, but his shoulders eased by a fraction. because for the first time the pain wasn't just a personal shadow behind him, it was a map forward. Maria exhaled. We'll need approval, funding, politics. Ethan's eyes hardened. Then we do what we always do. Maria's mouth twitched. We outwork it. Ethan looked down at the folder again. The line that mattered was there in ink. A date, a code, a proof that said you weren't abandoned by chance. You were moved by someone's hand. Ethan's voice was steady. I don't need a reunion, he said. I don't need the fantasy ending. Lena's eyes lifted. What do you need? Ethan's answer came without hesitation. I need the truth to stop being flammable. Maria held his gaze, then nodded once. Then we make it fireproof.